But yeah, hope is not what it's all about. Having a positive attitude, a positive approach to things, knowing what it is you want, knowing what you're in control of, making granular micro moves towards that with every day that passes. That's how you create momentum towards feeling better, feeling more in control, feeling like there's a better end result. You know, no one's guaranteed a happy ending in life. They're just not. But everybody can create one.
G'day team, welcome to the Feel Good Blueprint and to episode 8 of Iso-Intellect interviews. I'm your host Simon Marr, and I created the Feel Good Blueprint to bring together a community of like-minded people to share ideas, resources and tools to help others find their great. I'm grateful for you tuning into this episode, and if you like what you see or hear, if you could please consider subscribing or sharing with at least one friend, it'd make my day. My next guest is Mr. Martin Goodyer. Now he's a psychologist, author, speaker and teacher. But first and foremost, he's an executive coach of the highest quality. He's coached teams and individuals from around the globe in large and small companies. He's coached high-profile individuals across radio and TV, and that's just to name a few things that he's done. In this episode, Martin and I discuss what ancient history can teach us about our growth and development, what the future of life and work looks like in a post-corona world, and how we can ask ourselves better questions in order to ensure our own personal development. I've been lucky enough to be taught and coached by Martin myself. He makes the environment of learning, coaching and development so much fun. Now, besides being a top-notch practitioner, he's just an overall great guy. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I'm very excited today to be joined by a psychologist, executive and business coach, author and speaker, Mr. Martin Goodyer. Welcome to the Feel Good Blueprint.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Martin, I was lucky enough to be one of your students some time ago, and I really wanted to bring you in and talk about you in particular, and especially some of the things you've achieved over your life. And I think at the moment there's some really relevant, I suppose, advice and insight you could give to listeners around what's happening at the moment, but more broadly, what we can do into the future as well. So without further ado, I'd love to hear a bit more about you and your background.
Okay. Succinctly, I didn't begin life as a psychologist. Well, not everyone does, do they? I mean, you have to be a bit bonkers, I think, to be a psychologist. And, you start your first client's always yourself. But actually, I went into business management first, and I spent 18 years working for an international hotel company and traveled and all that good stuff. But, you know, one of the things that was interesting at that time was I learned that running a big enterprise like a large hotel, because they have things like golf courses and swimming pools, and they're not just about and stuff. You have a big management team with it. Is that it doesn't matter how good the outgoing general manager was from one unit to another when you took it over, you inherited all very similar problems, right? And it kind of led me to think, actually, I'm probably leaving the same kind of problems behind as well, for someone else to follow. And the problems were always about people and about how they engage with each other and how they delivered and what they believed and all that kind of stuff. And so when I had the opportunity, gosh, 24, something like that years ago now, I stepped out of that and I went back to school. And I started to learn about psychology. I became a psychologist. I specialized in behavioral change. Almost went into child psychology, but gave it a body swerve at the last minute. And was able to utilize what I was learning there with business skills that I got. And you're too young to remember things like the training and enterprise councils, but they were one of these government quangos where the great and the good got together to help things like IIP, help businesses do better with their people. And I've been very fortunate when I was with the hotels to be on a couple of the boards of those. And when I quit and I decided to go on my own and do something, go back to school, do something different, I had to leave the board because I was no longer one of the great and the good. And 2 days after leaving, I got a call from the chief executive saying, "Now you're free. Will you come work for us?" And my initial response was no. What would I want to do that for? And he said, no, I don't want you to come work for us full time, but just as an agent of ours. And I want you to try and do the same kind of things with people that you've been doing in the last few years with your hotels, but with small and medium-sized businesses. And I said, okay, that's fine. Now, what I didn't realize I was doing was stepping into the world of coaching. In fact, to be fair, I don't think people were calling it that then either, but it was great fun. I was going in and I was working with people that were mom and pop businesses that were developing, or that were entrepreneurs that had started and were now wanting to expand, or were buyouts from large corporations for the individuals that work there taking over. So I was on a fast learning curve to take my skills into that area. And at the same time, I was doing this degree in psychology. And I realized that the two things meshed together, business and people, and that became my life. After qualifying, I then went on to specialize in behavioral change courses, if you like, everything from what happens to when you sleep and how that affects what you're doing, through to things like the neuro-linguistic programming. I did that with the guy that invented it. Quite a funny story, actually. Dr. Bandler, I went and spent 10 days with him. Brilliant course. And at the end of it, I said, Dr. Bandler, I said, what do I have to do to get to be really good at this? And forgive the expletive here, but this is in the days when he wore a ponytail and black nail varnish on one hand. He looked me in the eyes and he said, you got to, and it was the F word, you got to effing practice. And I went, okay. So I did a deal, because I was ex-hotels and what have you. I did a deal with the manager of our local Marriott. And I knew that they had all these rooms where people had their nails painted and had massages and stuff during the week, or the ladies at lunch, you know. And the weekends, they were really quiet, particularly on a Sunday. So I went to them and I said, look, I've got a deal for you. I said, I do this behavioral change stuff now. Like, it's not really therapy as such, but I can help someone in a very short space of time change their behavior. In fact, 45 minutes is probably enough for many people if they've got like a fear of heights, or they're a bit nervous, or that they want to lose some weight, or something like any kind of change in behavior. I said, here's the deal. I'll come and do these sessions on a Sunday. You advertise me to your network of people that go to your gym and your golf course and what have you. You can set the price and you can keep all the money. And I say, what? I could be an income stream for you, and it's going to cost you nothing except giving me the room. And they went, you're on. So for 2 years, with the exception of holidays, I had a full rota of people every Sunday that started with just their members. Then word spread over time. This was in Wales that I was doing this, and before long, I had half the Cardiff Mafia coming to me for helping out with gambling addictions and all sorts of stuff like that. But it was super. It was super practice to be able to quickly and succinctly use some of the skills to help people change their behavior. Now, what I was able to do with that then in the workplace, when I was talking to people in business, was to be able to utilize language in a way that was more helpful. By the way, after that 2 years, I went back and I paid again to do the NLP Master Practitioner with Dr. Bandler. And this time, when I started, I said, "Do you recognize me?" And he went, "Yeah, I do." And I said, "It's Martin," and I used the same words, practice. And it was good fun. So that, yeah, all these years on now, I don't know anything except help people change their behaviors, either on a one-to-one basis or, as you experienced, in a group, so that they in turn can help positively manipulate the behaviors of the people that work with them. Manipulation's got a bad rap. Nothing wrong with manipulation. You can't negatively manipulate someone without them knowing, right? Because they'll know when you do that. But you can positively manipulate people to help them get more out of their workspace, out of their home environment, out of every day that they're engaging with you. And my supposed life's work is to help people do that, whether it be in terms of productivity, whether it be in terms of leadership, whether it be in terms of avoiding things that can drop you down a dark hole, or whether it be about learning to be a coach yourself without necessarily being a psychologist and without having to go through the route that I did. It's not necessary for everybody. It's about being appropriate for where you are. Was that that was that was longer than I thought it was going to be. So I apologize for that.
Very insightful. No, it's good to hear, and to hear your journey as well, how you came into that. And I think one of the things that really stuck out for me amongst all you did is you were volunteering your time in order to gain more experience as well in the early stages.
Oh yeah,
that allowed you to really accelerate as well.
Yeah, it is. It's inevitable, isn't it? With whatever you do, if you want to be a sports person and eventually want to be a professional sports person, you don't kind of walk in on day one and say, right, I'm brilliant, hire me. And by the way, I'm not brilliant yet, but if you pay me for practicing enough, I will be. That's not the way the world works.
Exactly. And that's a really good example, Martin, because I've spoken to a guest who actually played professional rugby for back home in Australia, Queensland and Australia. And he had to actually go and play for free for a professional club for a couple of years. And that was part of that whole experience. But I just really wanted to dive. Sorry, please.
No, I was going to say I've done a lot of work with the media as well. And that it's very similar there, that you get people that will work in the media situation for almost for nothing at the beginning. They'll be runners. They'll literally go and get coffee or take wires somewhere or whatever. But they do that in order to learn their craft, to be around people. One of the guys that was on I did a show, a number of shows, some on screen and some behind the scenes. And I did some behind the scenes work on a program called Adrenaline Junkie that was out on ITV2, I think, where we traveled around the world a bit. And one of the producers on that had come from a highly paid job and had literally started in TV because he knew that it was where he wanted to be. He wanted to shape what people saw and be able to communicate with people in a very different way. And he had to give up a couple of years of his life effectively in order to get where and then he was the main producer or one of the main producers on that particular program. And I think has gone on to do great things. So yeah, you've got to put the effort in first, and when you do that. And by the way, I was doing shows like that because it doesn't matter where the circumstances are that you're changing behavior. I spent some time with the last remaining nomadic tribe in the Borneo jungle with a group of young people who were there being filmed because they were with this guy, Jack Osborne, and he was helping them to conquer their fears. We had like recovering heroin addict and a guy that used to steal cars and someone else who had their mum competing with them. Her mum didn't actually know she was away. We were in New Zealand before her mum found out that she was actually out of the country, which was just, not great. So I had all these different types of people. A guy that had been bullied all his life, all that, and they were learning to go and do things that were these adrenaline junkie things to get themselves out of themselves. I was there to make sure that they were ready to be filmed, not to cheat, not to have them in a different state than they would normally be. But there's no point in carting people halfway across the world and then them having them there and then go, no, I don't really feel like doing it today, or I'm a bit scared to do it. So my job was to actually move them forward. It doesn't matter whether you're doing that in a Borneo jungle, whether you're doing it halfway up a mountain in New Zealand, or whether you're in the corporate jungles. It's all the same. The issues about engaging with things that matter to you, that you want, that are going to change your life for the better, take you closer to where you want to be, are the same, no matter where they are. So yeah, I haven't really. I'm a one-trick pony, really, Simon. I don't do anything.
Some incredible experiences though that we will definitely touch on a bit later as well. That Borneo experience sounded incredible. What does that manifest now as, through all your experience? What do you see most commonly as the coaching challenges, and how does that play out in what you actually practice or what you teach today? Okay,
so a couple of things are pretty standard. One is imposter syndrome, which has been around forever and a day. People growing in their career and not realizing how much they've grown. So it's a little bit like having a child, where you have the child grow up with you, and the child is growing because you have to keep buying new shoes and clothes and things. But it's only when Aunt Doris comes around or whatever that goes, oh my gosh, haven't you grown? You were only this big last time I saw you, whatever. That you really start to focus on the actual growth, the change in size. We don't have an Aunt Doris when it comes to work. we just get on with every day, and we have these incremental bits of growth that go on, and we tend not to see them. So when people get into positions of considerable authority and they start to manifest behaviors that are inconsistent with how they really believe themselves to be, so they might start becoming fearful. They might find themselves becoming overly arrogant in situations when they know they really don't want to be. Underneath those things, very often there is this lack of recognition that they are fully equipped to be able to do that job, that they have grown, that they do know what they're doing. So I do quite a lot of work in bringing that out of individuals, and it's not just a talking shop when someone's with me. I give them a hard time, I think, in terms of getting them to reflect on who they really are. And my particular approach is to help people understand the mechanics of what's going on. So I've learned over the years that, particularly with the people I think that are attracted to a fairly straight talker, which I am, is that they want to know, they don't want me to just ask them questions so that they come away with some idea of what might be better than they were before. They want to know what's going on. They want to know, why is it that I felt the way that I'm feeling? Well, I instinctively know that I ought to be saying something different to the people that work with me. I don't understand what it is that I'm supposed to be doing, and how can I replicate that? How can I keep on doing it? How can I do it on my own when I've no longer got a coach? So I help them. I help them by, where appropriate, providing them with that background understanding of what's going on, so that they can take control themselves. They can find their own way through it, but not feel as they're growing again, that they get another imposter thing. You know, oh my gosh, I'm stepping beyond my bounds. No, you're not. You're learning, you're developing. And if I give them the tools to understand what they're doing, then that really works. The second thing that goes on very often is people struggling with the way in which they communicate. That can be from a very positive point of view. So I've had a client who believed that by being positive all the time, that was going to be great. That person was all about inspiration and all about motivation, couldn't understand why some of the people that worked with him didn't trust him, didn't really believe it, even though he was 100% totally sincere in what was going on. And then you get the other end of things, where you get the kind of Fred Goodwin. I didn't coach Fred Goodwin, by the way, but this is the guy that was in charge of one of the banks that shouted at someone because they brought in pink wafer biscuits on rather than quality biscuits in their new boardroom. And I don't know whether he fired her or not, but certainly gave this tea lady, a very hard time. That kind of, what are you doing, leadership approach, that unfortunately it happens more often than we'd like to necessarily admit to. And when people become self-aware enough to recognize that this is not serving them well, that they're not getting what they want, then inevitably it isn't about them, on the whole, this is on the whole, right, about them being a sociopath, that there's something wrong with them. It's just about the way in which they're communicating, not only with other people, but with themselves. So how they're communicating their own beliefs about themselves, their own values, their understanding of what it is that's going to work for them, and then for other people. I said on the whole, because you do occasionally get the sociopath in there, but they're fewer than you might think. I mean, sociopathic behavior, a lot. Apparently not caring, apparently being focused on just the organization's goals and not the individuals. And we are seeing that right now in this pandemic going on. How many times are we hearing from organizations now, we're all in this together?
Yes.
Meaning, if you translate it, we're going to cut costs and you're going to have to share some of the pain because we're not making as many profits. Inevitably, that then creates a response that says, no, we're not in it together. We weren't in it together when we were making huge profits and I was on minimum wage. How was that in it together then?
Yeah.
So when people are self-aware enough to recognize that those things really aren't working, aren't giving them what they need, then I can help them sort that out. I do help them sort that out, so that they can be true to themselves and then true to the people that they work with. That doesn't mean stretching the truth in any way or trying to butter people up or anything like that. In fact, quite the reverse. It's about being really clear about what is going on, what genuinely is happening, and sometimes with very hard messages, but doing it in a way where people can believe in you, where they can accept it, where they can recognize, actually, this works. We've got a classic at the moment, haven't we, with our Prime Minister and one of his aides that has apparently not broken any lockdown rules and apparently not broken the law and apparently acted with integrity, all of which may well be true, but is irrelevant, completely irrelevant in terms of perception and communication with people in the country, people who have not looked at the letter of the law, but have locked themselves down to say, I will not see my aging relatives, even though they might be dying, because it's the wrong thing to do. I do have a 4 or 5 year old child that would love to see their grandparents, and I've got a bit of a cough today. And it would be nice if Granny and Grandpa could look after them while I go to work or while I do something else. Those instincts that are there, they've avoided them because they believed that they were following their Prime Minister's lead. And then when that lead is taken away by explanations, intellectual twisting of what has gone on in order to justify something, of course, they lose their trust. Now, we see that happen time and time again. Boris, bless him, probably needed a decent coach before all this, but instead he's got advisors. Yeah. Bit of a mistake.
It is. That's something in my conversations I've come up across quite a lot, and it's not just the UK where there's this communication paradox, and there is these trust challenges that will come with this because. I hate to use a term, but unprecedented. It goes alongside we're all in this together, doesn't it?
I've got a client who is he's a friend now as well. That is a musician and a songwriter, and he's just writing a song for the Democrats in the States at the moment called "Unprecedented."
I like it.
Which is really cool. Yeah,
I can't imagine the creativity that's coming out of houses and flats and all these different places at the moment that'll come out in a few months and years. Unbelievable.
It's all going on. That's for sure. The human condition doesn't stop just because we've got something that's going our way. That'll be very interesting. It's interesting that there are a number of people, I think, that are reevaluating their lives because of their values. Why should I go out and work to pay my childminder and give me the money to go and spend on frivolous things that I've just been able to live without for this long? And instead of those frivolous things, I've had the joy of being with my child. I've heard that more than once. I've heard the opposite as well. Oh, I can't wait to get them off back to school.
Right, and who needs to work when the government's dishing out all this money for people to just use, which is necessary, mind you. But if this is another way to live life, well, we're being shown it right now. I don't think it's sustainable, but it's very interesting time.
Well, there are things. There was, if you're interested, there was a paper I wrote years ago, a copy of which I think is on my website. That was before people started talking very much about universal basic income, that essentially talks about that. And what I was doing at the time was I was thinking ahead about AI and what it really does, machine learning and replacement of people with very simple automated systems like self-checkouts, for example. Mm-hmm. They weren't there when I wrote that, but they are now. And there are millions and millions of applications that are happening all the time that are essentially becoming uncomfortable, I think, for people. And what I was saying in there is that rather than them being uncomfortable, how about we switch to really encouraging them, How about we help the big corporations and those that are large enough strip out as much labor as they can, reduce the amount of jobs that are in there, become highly, highly profitable, make as much money as you possibly can, but then tax that money. So they end up taking more away, but are facilitated in doing the things that they want, and then have a universal basic income primarily from corporation taxes across the board, scrap all benefits, so that none of the costs of administering them, etc., are there anymore, because you don't need them if you've got a UBI. You might still have some things like social housing or whatever that become a separate issue, but actually benefits themselves. Why have someone feel like a victim and a scrounger because they've come on hard times? Why not instead have a situation where everybody's got a basic income? If they want to spend that time at home with their kids, then let them. That saves us money across the board. If they don't want to travel for work every day but want to do a part-time job being at home instead, let them get on with it. If 4 or 5 people with their universal basic income every week want to use that to start their own little company together, then let them get on with it. Or if people want to bank their universal basic income along with whatever salary they've got so they can buy a bigger house or a bigger car or whatever it is, let them do that too. Reality is that this money that's just come into the economy, most people on those furloughs will not have saved that money. It will have gone straight back into the economy again. Money goes round. Money is just a keeping score and of keeping things going. So when people recognize, as you say, that there is a difference in the way in which they could live, when they move away from centuries old politics, driven by, the right and the left, all came about because of someone sitting on the right or the left side of the King of France, right? It's not like something that has been there forever in human history. It's relatively modern. And so if we want to, we can overhaul it, but it starts, just like in our own life, starting to overhaul our own life or overhaul our own career. It starts by asking a better question. And the better question is, what is it we want? Well, we'd quite like clean skies, please. Quite like clean oceans. Quite like to enjoy life and not feel that it's a treadmill that you're on until you're too old to be able to enjoy it, and then you've just got enough to keep you alive until you croak. It can be better than that.
Yeah.
Am I preaching, Simon?
Yes, but no, it's interesting. I'll have to check that article out because it's a conversation point again coming up, and a lot of the principles that you discussed there may be put on the table again in the future.
I hope so.
Yeah. And speaking of your writings, looking into some of the books that you've actually produced yourself, I am partway through reading Being a Boss Doesn't Make You a Leader at the moment. Amongst others, you've got How to Be a Great Coach, The Productivity Genius, and WTF Just Happened, amongst some other publications as well. But I just want to zoom in on a couple of the readings at the moment. As I said, I'm reading Being a Boss Doesn't Make You a Leader. And I'll put all the links in the description to these books. But what particularly has grabbed me so far, amongst all the concepts that you bring about in this book, is your thought process. And I think it was on a plane coming back from a successful workshop, you're trying to summarize the transformation of some of the bosses that you've been working with towards leaders. And you're thinking about the origins of this process and the true source of the ideas. And just to quote the book, I knew from the deep dive reading I'd been doing for a PhD that there was an uncanny similarity between modern coaching concepts and philosophical thinking from way back when. Maybe then my less than 30-second explanation was that, quote, they had moved from successful bosses to even more successful bosses that were now thinking like successful leaders, asking better questions, thinking without so much constraint and with more creativity, end quote. Yes, that sounded much more like it. Not perfect by any means, but better. All those exercises, learnings, and conversations they'd had over that weekend and had 100% left them thinking, questioning, and acting in a different way. Ha! Who needs 30 seconds to explain? I just cracked them in less than 10. That's really stuck with me so far. And I just really wanted to go into the book in a bit more detail, and maybe just an overview for some of the listeners. But you've really married this fantastic relationship between, the work you've done on philosophy with psychology and coaching, and you've sort of married and melded them together in this book. Tell us a bit more about how that came about.
Well, when you talk about human behavior, very often you've got to look at the origins. Where did that come from? What is it that caused a social norm, is the psychological term, the way people behave and what's expected of them? Where did that come from? And looking at that and trying to find that out meant stepping into the world from psychology into philosophy, because so many of them came from that area. The classics are the source of so much of the way in which we think these days, that we just take it for granted. We ignore it. So it was once I started to look at that and learn some things, I thought, well, that's really interesting. When I had that response that was like, I didn't know that. How did I not know that? Then, and also when things made me laugh, which I think laughing is so important for us when we're learning. I thought, you know what? If leaders could figure out that really all they're doing is that they're taking the best from all these thought leaders that have gone on before, and they're not having to recreate things. It's not about, with all due respect to the authors that produce it, it's not about the latest big thing in leadership. It's like they're trying to reinvent the wheel over and over again. Leadership is about having people willingly follow you to a place that is better than where they've been before. That's it, right? It's no more complicated than that. And that's been going on for an awful long time. And leadership, not just in terms of being at war and needing to have peace in your land or whatever, but leadership in terms of how do we overcome things? I mean, the first guy that I came across, the original philosopher, apparently, at least the original Greek philosopher, Thales of Miletus. I mean, this guy, all the images of him, he looks like a flipping Greek god, never mind a philosopher. Apparently he was a big burly chap that the ladies quite liked. And he came from quite a wealthy background, and he was a bright lad. Now, I sort of think about him as being the first person to sort of invest in futures, really. And he was created that whole idea, because what he did is he questioned the environment that was around him. There were people going about their daily business. When things went well, they thanked the gods. When things were not going so well, they went and took offerings to the gods to hope that it did. So when the wind blew, it was all, well, what have we done to cause that? When the sun shined, haven't we done well? And he sort of looked at this and thought, there's going to be a bit more to this than meets the eye. These people are kind of being led by their environment rather than leading themselves. And he just happened to notice that whenever there was a particularly wet spring and then a gorgeous summer, that the olive harvest was brilliant. Lots of big plump olives that people wanted to press into oil and make lots of money. And that when the rains were happening, people were kind of, oh gosh, the gods aren't happy with us. They were less inclined to be interested in their presses. So as he'd seen this happen on a number of years, when it was raining, he went out and he said, do you want to sell your press? And he invested in all these presses when nobody wanted them. And then, of course, came the summer. They always get a good summer over there on the Greek islands. There were these big fat olives, and everybody wanted their presses to press the oil. And he could have fleeced them. It could have been a one-time deal where he overcharged them and then caused them to want to build their own new presses. But he didn't do that. He rented them back at a reasonable rate so that he made some money, and they were happy with it. And therefore, every year when they needed them, he was renting out the presses. He went from being just a bit wealthy to very wealthy. And his whole point was, it wasn't about the money. It was about, by asking a better question, you can take control of your life. what else is it that's going on around us that we take for granted, that we believe because the person before us believed it, that actually may be holding us back rather than leading us forward. And he kicked off this whole idea that spawned the not just Greek, but international sort of philosophy movement, people gathering together to ask questions about their world. Now, when you take, there's not an obvious link when you think about it at the beginning between that and leadership today, until you start saying, okay, well, what were these guys' outcomes? What is it they wanted to achieve? Well, they wanted their thinking to change the behavior of the people that were around them. They wanted their thinking to lead to a better life. Now, isn't that what leaders want to do in a business? They want to change people's thinking and therefore their behavior to lead to a better business result. So inevitably, the behaviors of these early philosophers, not all the behaviors, right, but the things that actually worked, there's some weird stuff going on. Walking around naked, or one guy made bronze sandals, and I think must have been uncomfortable. But hey, the stuff that really worked for them, that is transferable. You can bring that into today, into the way in which people think about their world and the way in which they react. And the really cool thing is that because these are memories of what people have done before, they're not made up new theories. They have some credence. They have some legs, if you like, that hold up that table of belief, that say, well, hang on, there is something in this that maybe I could try. And therefore my goal was to try and help people in a light-hearted way. Well, you kind of, that little excerpt you read, you see it's not exactly academic, is it? I mean, the way that it's written, more musings than anything, but in a way that's helpful for them. What I did for each of the philosophers that's in there, I used a thing called Dilt's neurological pyramid, which is a pyramid of the way people think. Starting with at the very bottom with how they experience their environment, moving up to their social norms of the time and expectations, their skills and knowledge that they had available to them as individuals, through to their likely beliefs. I mean, I got to guess at some of those based on where they were at, and their likely values that then fed in to their identity, how they saw themselves, and ultimately their purpose. And by looking at every one of them, it gives the same kind of template for each person that's there that you can follow your way through. Obviously, some are longer than others, depending on the amount of information that's there. But I think, if memory serves, I think there's 37 of them that I've covered in the book, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, it's really thorough. And by the way, I love the tone of voice that you do use. You know, I think it brings a lot of humor and personality to it, and you can really connect with it, because I suppose such an ancient subject can feel so distant, but you've been able to really make it feel more present and now. And forgive me for simplifying, because I'm not completely finished with the book at the moment. But one of the things that I think that stuck out and really probably applies to a lot of leaders or bosses at the moment is around this fear, being gripped by fear. And I guess my question would be, do you think that we're seeing a lot more bosses and potentially leaders being gripped by fear, which is changing behavior as well at the moment?
I'm not sure whether it's any more than it ever was, to be fair with you. They're just different fears. So there are legitimate fears from many people that their jobs are going to go, particularly in leadership positions. If there is downsizing, and there is a reason for downsizing, as has been sort of provided now, if you like, then yeah, they're going to be out of a job. And for many of them, they haven't thought about what it is that they might want to do instead. And this is the problem with not giving yourself the opportunity to think about what it is that you really want. Not to establish for yourself this flag in the sand, that you're standing on this, imagine yourself standing on a cliff and you're looking down at the sand and the sea, and it goes on forever and ever, and way there in the distance, past all the rocky eddies and sand dunes and stuff, is a flag that's got something on it. You can't quite see what it is, but you can see there's a flag there, and that flag is what you ultimately want. And these guys and ladies that are going to be without a job probably haven't thought about what their flag means to them. And the flag meaning is how you want to feel, the things that matter to you most, the way in which you want to live your life. All of those kind of things are in there. Not the detail like a SMART goal of achieving this, buying this house or whatever, but the who, the identity for you of who you want to be. And because they haven't done that, then they also haven't thought about what else could I be doing with my life right now. Much of the negative behavior that then is exhibited by them right now isn't actually the fear of losing their job. It's the frustration and fear within themselves as to why haven't I done something about this right now? Why haven't I done something about this before? I knew it was going to happen. It's happened to other people. I'm not stupid. I could have seen this on the cards, and yeah, I've left it for this long. Those are the kind of internal conversations that go on with people that cause them to respond in very negative ways right now. Yeah, the interesting thing, you know, I think it came out of some of the research that in the productivity book, I can't remember now, but one of the things that happens when companies are going to downsize is that the first people who know that it's going to happen are the shop floor workers. That they know, right? Because they can see way in advance the number of, I don't know if they're a car company or whatever, the number of vehicles they're producing, or if it's a widget company, the amount of widgets that are going out the door, or how many have been stored because they're not. They can see, right? They're aware of what's going on. And therefore they translate that into an understanding that says, yes, some of us are going to go. We're going to go. And then they wait. They all chat about it in the amongst themselves, but they're waiting for the word to come. Management, who for some reason want to keep all this secret because they think people don't know because they're adrift of what's going on. They're caught up with themselves. They go into all these secret huddles and secret meetings, and eventually they come out with the brown envelopes. And people get their brown envelopes to tell them that they are now under threat of redundancy. Now, logically, you would think that when someone gets one of those brown envelopes and they see that they're under threat of redundancy, that they would feel bad. But actually, when all this has gone on beforehand, they open it up and they feel relief. Because now at least I know. Yeah. Now at least I can do something with it, which is kind of counterintuitive, but it's what goes on. So all this fear that you talk about now it's not the fear of the loss of the job, it's the fear of being able to cope with the loss of the job. And actually, when you know what's going on, my company is closing, I need to do something different, I need to start working on it right now. When that becomes certain, then there is a change in that emotion. Now it's like, okay, I'm no longer frightened, I can now get on with it. I don't know what's going to happen. Then people can start pulling themselves together and do something about it. We are going to have a tough time. There's no question about that. But tough times come in cycles. They've always been there. And indeed, the likes of the cynics that you've probably read about in the book there, the first cynic, Diogenes of Sinope, asked one of my favorite questions of Alexander the Great when he was asked if he wanted to ask him anything. He said, yeah, could you move out my sunshine, please? Yeah. Just cynicism being all about taking things down to the minimum. What is the least I need to be able to live the kind of life that I want? And the cynicism is not being negative. It is questioning. It is questioning, what's this for? Why? Why do we need all the things that we need right now? And while people have gone through this change and they have found themselves, they may be furloughed, as you say, and have had some money from the government or whatever, so they could have spent some money, if 80% of whatever they got before, but have not been able to go and do it. They've not been able to go out to a restaurant, take a walk out shopping on a Sunday to buy things that they didn't know they wanted before they went there. But it's shopping has somehow become a leisure activity rather than the fulfillment of a need. They've not been able to do these things, and they've not missed it. It was a change of behavior at the beginning. It feels a bit odd that I'm not doing this, but then something else has happened. Some people have learned to cook. Some people have learned to do hobbies. Some people are doing stuff that they've never done before, which now leads them to the point, like the cynics, where they question, why did I need all those things? maybe I can live my life in a different way. So it's not all bad, is what I'm saying. That those fears that are out there, once someone starts to think about what they want and what they are in control of, as opposed to what is outside of their control, then they start doing better. And probably the most used conversation that I've had over this whole period, whatever it be, publicly or in one-to-ones, is for people to see things as they are. That's it. It's the way it is right now. And to recognize this level of control they have. Not to see things and catastrophize them the way it could be that hasn't happened yet. I mean, if you're going to imagine something good, for crying out loud, rather than bad. Or pretending that things are better than they are. That it's all going to be okay. Don't know how yet, but it will be fine. The sort of Trump, this will disappear approach. Because the only person you can't lie to is yourself. And when someone is trying to say out loud that things are better than they are, internally, they know the truth. They're not really deluded. They're genuinely going, well, yeah, maybe if I hope things will be better. No, an old teacher of mine used to say, you can have BS in one hand and hope in the other and see which one fills up first. Yeah. I'll leave you to figure that one out, right? But yeah. But yeah, hope is not what it's all about. Having a positive attitude, a positive approach to things, knowing what it is you want, knowing what you're in control of, making granular micro moves towards that with every day that passes. That's how you create momentum towards feeling better, feeling more in control, feeling like there's a better end result. You know, no one's guaranteed a happy ending in life. They're just not. But everybody can create one.
Martin, I saw that in a video you recently uploaded. I thought that was really insightful advice as well. It's so important to be real with ourselves and to not get in the way of ourselves. So very sound advice. I just want to check as well. We're now on the hour. Have you got a little bit more time to speak, or are you?
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
If you've had enough of me, just say.
Not at all. I've just not put enough time in your diary. So I just want to move on to this piece around how coaching could be used for, let's say, the everyday person that may not have much experience in this field. I'd like to get your thoughts on how someone that's, you know, I suppose looking at this situation and trying to make some more sense of it, or needs to ask themselves better questions. What's a good starting point for some of these people?
Okay, the easiest way to turn yourself from being whatever you are right now into someone that is doing a bit of coaching is simply to look at performance, meaning what's going on around you, whether it be what you achieve yourself, what other people achieve, even what you're having for dinner tonight, right? The performance of whatever is going on around you. Stop looking at it as something to be measured. Stop looking at it as being it's external to you, and instead look internally and say, what's my potential? What's the most I can do? If the most, let's take cooking, for example. If the most that you can do is boil an egg and you're not really sure about that, but you just know that when it comes to food, you've only got to look at something and it burns, then make the best boiled egg you can. That's all. And identify the things that get in the way of you making a good boiled egg and just really enjoy it. For most people, however, the reason the boiled egg thing comes up is because they haven't actually tried doing anything else. They've never had any experience of it. They've never done it. And for cooking, you could say public speaking, you could say taking on a new job, you could say finding a new partner, you could say bringing up your kids, you could say homeschooling your kids, any of these things, right? Instead of looking at the performance, oh, I'm not good at that, I've never done that before, I'm useless at this, all those things that come up, let go of it. Ask instead, what is my potential? If there was nothing getting in the way, if I was able to learn whatever I needed to learn, if I was able to just do it, have I got the potential to do it? Can I be a great cook? Can I be a great homeschool dad? If the answer to that is, well, yeah, of course I can, then the question becomes, well, what's stopping me doing it? Not what's stopping me becoming the best I can be, but what's stopping me getting better now. So if I was to be a better homeschool dad next week, what's getting in the way of that? Oh, well, I might actually have to do a lesson plan, but I don't know how to do one. I might need to think about what the kids would really learn rather than just try and find them something to do for every couple of hours. So just granular, tiny things like that play into the potential that you've got, and then take those barriers away. And the same thing is true with cooking or with anything else. You look at your full potential, and then you look at your potential next week or tomorrow or tonight or whatever. In the length of that, and you may have heard me describe it in this way before, but to think about your potential as being like a river. Started off with a great big waterfall that was very powerful, that then had a cataract where there's loads of like rocks and stuff that make the water shoot up and down all over the place, and then as it keeps going, it builds up silt and trees fall in it, and it forms a dam, and then it forms another dam and another dam, and the river continually gets less powerful with the more natural dams that it builds up, until eventually the river is a stream. But the stream still builds up little dams and stuff that's in it, and then may become a trickle. Your performance is somewhere from that, or your potential, I should say, is somewhere from that trickle all the way through to being a mighty river. Your performance is likely to be at the bottom end of that, because you've allowed dams to get in the way to prevent your potential. So quit looking at what you're doing right now and what you're judging your performance to be, and start looking upriver and going, how far could I be back here? And therefore, what dams do I need to take out of the way in order to get me to where I want to be? Now, the beauty of seeing it in that way, Simon, is then when you're having a conversation with someone else, use exactly the same model. Exactly the same. So you're having a conversation with your partner, and your partner says, "Oh God, I wish we could go out for a meal because I'm not very good at cooking tonight." And instead of saying, "Yeah, you're right, you're rubbish," instead of saying that, yeah, exactly. You might instead go, "All right, if you were good, if you could do something, even though you don't know how to do it next, what could you see yourself doing? You know, what could you imagine yourself?" Because if you could imagine yourself doing something, you have the potential to do it. It's almost impossible to imagine yourself actually doing something if internally you don't believe you ever could. Because it's that clash of belief within you. So the person says, "Well, I could see myself doing a really nice Chinese style meal or Asian fusion or whatever." And then go, okay, so if that was to be you in 6 months' time and you were on a journey to that, what would tomorrow's meal be? That's all. So you're using the same approach. And then they say what that is and say, well, what's stopping that happening? And maybe how can I help or whatever. So all you're doing is you're looking at things, and I wish I'd made all this up, but I didn't. It was a guy called Tim Galway that basically came up with this formula that says someone's performance in anything is directly equal to their potential, their personal potential, minus the interference that's getting in the way. Right? That's the formula. Now, you don't have to think formula. You just have to think logically. You know, just stop looking at the performance and look at the potential. Kids are great with this, right? People box their kids into corners because they're looking at their performance now. Cool, you've never been good at maths, have you? So maybe you shouldn't look at that as a career. No, I want to slap the parent with a wet fish when I hear anything like that. Instead, it's like, well, who are the kids in school that are great at maths? So are they intrinsically better than you? Are they cleverer than you? No, of course not. Okay. So could you ever see yourself beating them? Don't worry about how, but could you? Yeah, I could. All right. So all we've got to do is we've got to find out. We just got to break down the barriers until you can do it. it honestly, it may sound like I'm making stuff up, but I'm not. It is absolutely doable in every aspect of life. You probably can tell I'm a bit passionate about it as well.
Yes, and the thing is, Martin, we've discussed this as well in the workshops I've done with you. I've heard you speak to this, and I absolutely resonate with it. It's a really powerful way to look at it, particularly with the river scenario too, thinking about that. And it brings me to this thought. Just, I wanted to touch on this with you because we discussed it before we started recording, and it has to do with the productivity piece. And I've heard a lot of conversations about this at the moment. I've had them as well around, and I feel like I'm potentially, for lack of a better term, a victim of this productivity trap as well. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on what that can do to people, and actually how we can overcome that need to have all these outputs and to be able to be these productive machines. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there are two outcomes when we talk about productivity to do with work. Okay, let's think about it in those terms. There are two outcomes for that productivity that are necessary, not desirable, necessary. One is whatever you're delivering for the organization, but the other one is what it's giving you, what it's delivering for you. If those two things are not aligned, given the chance for you to do something else that is more aligned with your goals or your values, you'll end up doing that. Now, sometimes that's not a problem. Sometimes the discussion is going to be, and I think I was talking about some academic work that I need to get done, versus spending time with my family that live here and my dogs. And as I was saying, I was coaching someone in Amsterdam this morning, and then I'm up a ladder doing some painting to help my wife. Back here talking to you, it's not my normal day, right? But once you recognize that whatever you're doing is taking you closer to where you want to go, that's the only question you ever need to ask yourself. Once you've got that flag in the sand for yourself, that emotional understanding of what makes you you, the kind of person you want to be, the legacy that you leave behind is not a towering business or whatever. It's the emotions that you've left in people. It's the memories that they have of you. That, and the lasting memories, that's legacy. When you identify what those legacies are for yourself, then it becomes easy to say, okay, well, actually, I'm not being less productive. I'm being more productive in taking me closer to where I want to go. Now, if your organization wants you to deliver more in a business sense than what you're doing at the moment, they better be damn sure that they are aligning those organizational goals with your personal ones. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. That's where you get things like presenteeism at work, where people are more worried about being there and being seen to be there than delivering on outcomes. I asked an HRD last week, human resources director, not of a huge company. They've got about, I think, 700, 800 people that work for them. And I said, what would you rather have? Would you rather have full attendance with no sickness at all, or every one of those people achieving the maximum potential for their outcomes for the business? I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? Yeah. She laughed. She went, yeah, of course, the latter. I said, well, when you think about your policies, which one are you promoting? There was an expletive that followed that.
Yeah.
So it's this questioning of ourselves. Productivity is about using what we know, and using what we know in a way that works. I mean, I wrote a book. I was hired to write a book, as opposed to me wanting to write a book years ago. I'm not even sure how long it was published, but it was out there. It was a study of 40 academic studies, some of which were cutting edge, some of which were forgotten, and some of which were fairly standard. But about productivity, how you could use what was learned in productivity. Some stunning stuff came out of that for me. We always think of the automotive industry as being right on the edge of learning things like, total quality management and all that good stuff that came out of Japan post Second World War.
Kaizen,
yeah, all that. And it turned out that in this study of, I think it was 71 automotive parts manufacturers in the UK, that they had in their quality departments, they had stopped using almost 75% of what they had learned in the past. It had gone, been forgotten, organizational memory loss. And the reason why? Well, because people are what shape our organizations. What people do is what shapes them. If you don't ask those people the right questions, if you don't engage with them in a way that fulfills them individually as well as the organization's goals, you'll get that bare minimum. The performance is not what makes it bad. The potential is always there to make it brilliant, as we've said before. It's the interference that gets in the way, and half that interference is, well, no one's really bothered. It's not important at the moment. Management say one thing, but they mean another. Oh, it'll all be about cost cutting anyway, so we don't have to go worry about anything else. So if you get that kind of negative, that's not cynicism, by the way. That's fear of not being in control, and therefore acting in a way that protects themselves so that they don't get hurt by it.
Really great advice. I think, at the moment, there's probably a lot of people with those questions, and probably people that got some time to themselves, and you've been able to cover both areas, which is great. I'm conscious of time, Martin, so I just wanted to ask you, is there anything at the moment that you're, whether it be a muse, a particular activity that you're recharging the batteries, or any books or anything that you're finding some downtime or some pleasure from at the moment that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing that. I was telling you earlier on that on my 50th birthday, which was a decade ago almost now, my wife bought me some singing lessons, which was a weird present, but turned out to be one of the best presents ever. Not because I have any illusions about being a great singer, but because it's so good for your breathing and your stance and doing something that you don't think you can do and doing it better. And this year she bought me a guitar for my 60th. So, and I've never played the guitar, and I have no idea. And I am now beginning to use lessons. So the point of telling you that is that it's about stretching yourself to do things that perhaps you hadn't thought of. I honestly believe that the best presents you can ever buy for someone are those that make their eyes light up, but that they would never have bought for themselves. And she's cracked it again with
She nailed it.
Yeah, she's nailed it. And so learning to do something that's new, whatever age you're at, is great, and not for showing off or anything like that, but just for you, just for doing it for you. And that way you'll keep yourself active and alert. And if anyone that's listening to this feels in any way stressed, because stress is such a big issue right now. Stress is just an indication that the way in which you believe your life should be is not the way that it's turning out. And it's the difference between those two things. So if you think about it in those terms, it won't be that your boss is a horrible person, or that there's more month than money, or any of those things. It will be because it's not matching your expectations. So go back to what I was saying earlier and think about your potential. Does your life have the potential to be like you want it to be? Or are you, I don't know, sat in a flat in London somewhere and wishing you were Kylie Jenner? No, not you. You know, something that is unattainable. You're not going to be that person. Then be real with yourself. Be real with yourself in both ways. If it is never going to happen, and actually it's not really what you want anyway, you're just holding yourself to account for it, to beat yourself up, then let it go. If, on the other hand, you do have the potential, even though you don't know how, and the don't know how is irrelevant at this point. Because anyone that's listening to this, if I said to them, go back 5 years in your life, go back from 2020 now to, what would it have been? 2015, thank you. Maths is number strong point. Back to 2015. And just ask yourself, could you have predicted everything that's happened to you in the last 5 years? And the answer for every one of us is no, of course not. There have been some things that have been good, some things that have been not so good. But the one thing that's consistent is that it's a dynamic world and you didn't know what was going to happen. The same thing is true now. You do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. And it can be good. And if you're geared up to be thinking about your potential and starting to make granular micro moves towards it, just with what you've got right now, you may surprise yourself in a way that's wonderful.
It's been very enjoyable and insightful. As always, I enjoy every moment with you. Martin Goodyer, thank you so much for your time. So there you have it, my interview with Martin Goodyer. I hope you got something out of it like I did. Now, if you've got any questions, feedback, opportunities, or anything in between, feel free to email me at thefeelgoodblueprint@gmail.com. Thank you.